Hey Denchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to my review of the debut album from the Denver-based producer Illenium. This one's called Ashes, and honestly, this album came as one of the most surprising releases in the last couple of months. Honestly, I really have to congratulate Illenium right off the bat for creating such a coherent and awesome album. This thing is extremely well produced, and I think is the direction dance music needs to go at this point. I think Illenium tends to take a lot of stylistic approachings. It's very similar to Porter Robinson, possibly Seven Lions as well. But honestly, on this thing, you're hearing a lot more diversity. This thing, I even think, in a lot of places, does better than Worlds did back in 2014, and quite a bit better than what Seven Lions has been doing with his last couple EPs. I think this album is exactly what the future bass scene needs, it's exactly what the indie dance scene needs, and it's exactly what the melodic dubstep scene needs. So honestly, if you can tell right off the bat, I'm really digging this thing. Illenium kind of initially, in my opinion, got popular from his Cascade Disarmy remix. I'm sure he had quite a big following before that, but that's really where his popularity boosted in the last year. And since then, he's been on a streak of releasing original after original, none of which I've really checked out, regretfully now, because the singles on this thing that have been out for months are some of my favorites on this record. I might as well dig straight into this thing and sink my teeth into whatever I can. First of all, I'd like to point out With You and Without You, two of the more interesting releases on this album. Take a little bit more of a pop sound, kind of a chill sound. With You, featuring Quinn XCII, kind of sounds like an electronic version of a John Mayer track, which caught me so off guard with this album. I made it one of the more interesting listens. Not as surprising on Without You later in the record, kind of taking a more feminine approach to that pop sound and kind of sounding fairly similar in stylistic terms to With You. But honestly, two of the more interesting listens on the record, and I think probably two of my favorites. Now that those are out of the way, I'll talk about the tracks that I really didn't like so we can get into the really juicy stuff. Honestly, the one that's really bugging me on this album is actually the Sound Remedy collab, Spirals, which honestly has a progression that feels very similar to a lot of tracks in the EDM scene in the last couple of years, primarily Hardwell's Dare You, which I think was the first track to use that progression, and then a bunch of others kind of followed in that same direction that I've heard recently, primarily in house music, but regardless, just hearing that same style kind of translated into a future bass sound was really nothing new for me, and expected more from Sound Remedy, maybe not Illenium, because I had heard this song prior to the Illenium album, and if I had been an Illenium fan, this one would have been pretty disappointing, honestly, but being a Sound Remedy fan, this one was pretty flat. I didn't absolutely love I'll Be Your Reason, featuring Eden. This one heavily samples Eden's Whoa, which was released under his Eden Project alias. Kind of an interesting track, taking that kind of Imogen Heap, kind of, I guess you could say, auto-tune or vocoder type of sound. Really strips down the beauty that Whoa had and kind of translates it into a little bit more of a trap setting, which I think was not necessarily a bad choice. It was definitely interesting and caught me off guard to hear this set of lyrics from Whoa used and sampled in this, but I didn't absolutely love the new rendition. I probably liked it about as much as the original, which wasn't really one of my favorite Eden Project's track to begin with. Other than those minor picks, I think this album is fairly fantastic. Like I said, we've got the couple With You and Without You, which are two of the more interesting picks. And like I said, this thing does take a lot of stylistic approaches that Porter Robinson used, but in a way, because of the diversity of this thing and the sheer fact that he sticks to his own style in this one, and really seems to be pushing boundaries in the future-based melodic dubstep scene, I think this one works in a lot of ways better than Worlds did, but that doesn't completely make up for the fact that it did take some of the sounds fairly close, especially on tracks like Revier. On another hand, I think the flow of this album is incredible, especially being a lot of these tracks were singles. I think the fact that these tracks tend to flow from track to track fairly flawlessly is extremely impressive. Honestly, I think every EDM fan should surround him or herself with this album for a solid chunk of time and just be completely immersed by the beautiful vocals this thing brings and the gorgeous melodies that Illenium has invented with this thing. As someone who's listened to this about 3 times already, all on the same day, I can definitely say this album is absolutely huge, and Illenium deserves it. He actually, even though this album is has been given away for free download. This thing's available on iTunes as well and is shot straight to the #1 electronic spot. Extremely impressive for someone who's released their album for free, and that really says a lot about someone who was willing to do that and got this amount of popularity. I'm really proud of Illenium for this thing. Joni Fatora features on a couple of the tracks on this one of my favorites being Sleepwalker, which features a pretty intense guitar riff throughout the drop and kind of taking that really melodic dubstep approach, which I thought was super, super cool. Just the sheer amount of instrumentation on this thing is really leading me to really respect this thing. And like I said, the melodies on this one and the counter melodies, you can really just get totally immersed in and blown away by the beauty of this. Gonna skip over a couple of the tracks because, like I said, you're hearing some fairly repeating styles, that basic future bass melodic dubstep kind of sound, and this works for the most of the album. There's enough diversity within that genre that it sounds pretty good, honestly. I'd like to finish off with Afterlife featuring Echoes, which is probably my favorite track on the album, at least right now. This track has been released for a couple months, I think, and completely caught me off guard with its kind of glitchy sounds, exploding into this gorgeous, glitchy, melodic drop. I don't even know how to explain the kind of feels I'm getting from this thing, especially, I've mentioned before in a couple reviews that I really like it when the sound drops out and leaves you with a kind of silence, not knowing what to expect next, and this one definitely does that in a lot of places. In a way, a couple of the progressions on this track are reminding me heavily of Porter Robinson, but honestly I think this thing's unique enough that it can be avoided to kind of draw comparisons there. This track's honestly pretty incredible, along with the majority of this album. You guys are gonna love this, and there's not much bad I can say about this record at all. Like I said, there's one track that's kind of bugging me in its way that the chord progression's a little similar to a lot of things I've heard in the past couple years, but honestly that's my biggest pick with this album. Its cohesiveness is perfect. There's no excuse right now. Go and grab this album. I'll definitely link the free version of this album in the description, but please, if you enjoy this, go support him on iTunes with a download. I'm gonna have to give this one a solid 9. I didn't think it was quite deserving of a 9.5, and I'm trying to kind of cut back what I give albums ratings. 9.5 is basically going to be like almost perfect, but not quite there yet. 10.0 is going to be perfect. Otherwise, last year I probably would have given this one a 9.5, but I'm really trying to be a little bit more critical this year, so please forgive me. A 9.0 is friggin' good. Like, you can't avoid. Make sure to go and check this one out, and let me know what you think in the description if you enjoyed this album as much as I did. I really dig it, so hopefully you guys did too. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this bit of a review, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.